The Dragon Ship, a colossal warship designed by one of the most advanced alien civilizations in the galaxy, was stranded on a barren planet. It lay motionless in the middle of a dark, rocky wasteland. Once a symbol of unstoppable power, it was now a hulking shell of its former glory. The crew, made up of various alien species, had worked tirelessly for weeks, but they couldn't repair it. The ship's engines were down, and the control systems were a maze of unfamiliar technologies. Nothing they tried worked. A feeling of hopelessness hung over the ship. The planet they were on was hostile. There was no other civilization nearby, and a rescue mission was impossible. The enemy fleet was closing in, and if the ship couldn't be repaired, they would all die. The situation was dire. The ship's commander, a towering alien with dark scales named Rosk, paced nervously in the command room. His crew had tried everything. They had even called in engineers from different parts of the galaxy. But no one could fix the Dragon Ship. The ship's technology was unlike anything they had ever seen before. "We are out of options," Rosk said, his voice heavy with frustration. He turned to his officers, his eyes filled with disbelief. "This should never have happened. Our enemies will come for us. If we don't leave soon, we'll be destroyed." But as the crew looked down, there was a faint hope on the horizon. A small human technician had arrived. Mark Daniels was an unassuming man. He was no warrior, no engineer of the highest order. He was just a simple technician from Earth, a planet that the aliens thought of as primitive. Yet, Mark had a reputation that traveled far across the galaxy. When something broke and no one else could fix it, they called him. His talent for repair was unmatched, and even the most complex alien technology bowed to his skill. He had worked on ships from dozens of different species, always finding the answers that others missed. As Mark walked into the Dragon Ship's control room, the crew stared at him in silence. To them, he was nothing more than a human species they had always looked down upon. But Mark knew one thing. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to fix the ship, and he was going to do it, even if it meant going against everything. The aliens believed Mark took a deep breath as he approached the ship's massive control panel. The alien technology before him seemed overwhelming. It was unlike anything he had ever worked on, but he wasn't scared. He had faced far worse challenges before, and he knew how to think outside the box. If there was one thing he had learned in his career, it was that problems could be solved, no matter how impossible they seemed. Rosk stood nearby, his arms crossed, watching Mark closely. He wasn't convinced the human could do anything the others couldn't. The alien commander had his doubts, but he kept them to himself. It was his only option now, and he had to trust that Mark would somehow find a way. Mark pressed his fingers against the control panel. It hummed, but there was no response. He examined the panel closely, his eyes scanning each part of the system. He had seen alien machines before, but this was different. There was something about the way the ship was designed that made it more ... alive. The systems didn't just run on mechanical power, they seemed to have a mind of their own. An intelligence that even the most advanced species had failed to understand. He tapped a few buttons, then paused, thinking. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The crew was depending on him. It's the future of the ship. And everyone aboard rested on his shoulders. The crew stood in silence, waiting for something to happen. Mark continued working, his brow furrowed in concentration. Time was running out, and the enemy fleet was getting closer with each passing moment. The pressure was immense, but Mark didn't let it overwhelm him. He had to focus as he worked. He noticed something strange. The ship's systems flickered briefly, as if reacting to his touch. He leaned in closer, examining the flickering lights. It wasn't a malfunction, it was something more. He wasn't sure what it was, but he felt a spark of hope. He wasn't just fixing a ship. he was understanding it. The ship's systems were somehow responding to his presence. To his touch, the crew exchanged worried looks, still unsure whether this human technician could actually succeed. Vrosk clenched his fists, watching Mark with a mixture of doubt and curiosity, suspense. Would Mark be able to repair the unrepairable, or was this mission doomed to fail? The stakes couldn't be higher. The enemy was closing in. The dragon ship needed to rise before it was too late. Mark Daniels stood in front of the massive control panel of the dragon ship, feeling the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. His fingers brushed over the alien controls, trying to make sense of the intricate patterns and symbols. The ship's systems hummed quietly, like a sleeping beast, waiting for someone to wake it. But no matter how hard Mark tried, nothing worked. The engine didn't start, and the screens stayed dark. He sighed deeply, frustrated. This wasn't like anything he'd ever worked on before. Alien technology was complicated, but he was used to solving problems. This was something else. Every button he pressed felt like a guess. Every adjustment seemed to make things worse. Behind him, the alien engineers and crew stood in silence, watching him. Vrosk, the ship's commander, paced back and forth, his claws tapping against the floor in nervous rhythm. He had seen many engineers fail, and Mark was just another one in a long line. The human was no different. How could a simple technician from Earth be the one to fix what alien minds couldn't? "Keep going, human," Vrosk said, his voice low but filled with a hint of doubt. "But know this, we don't have much time." Mark didn't answer. He didn't need to. He knew what was at stake. He could feel the pressure mounting, but he pushed it aside. The mission had to succeed. There was no other option. Mark began again, scanning the console for anything that could give him a clue. The buttons and levers were alien, their designs elegant and complex, but Mark had seen similar technology in his travels. Maybe not the exact same, but enough to know that all technology had one thing in common: logic, as far as he was concerned, was universal. He reached for a panel on the side of the control console, prying it open with a careful pull. The wires inside were unlike anything he had seen before, glowing softly, pulsating as if they had a life of their own. He felt a strange sensation run through his fingers as he touched them, like the ship was aware of his presence. It was almost as if it was waiting for something. He reached into the tangle of wires, trying to figure out which ones connected to what. Sweat began to form on his brow. His movements were quick but cautious, each wire a potential disaster if handled wrong. He could hear the crew whispering behind him, the alien engineers murmuring in their native languages, no doubt discussing how hopeless this was. Mark didn't listen to them. He had to focus. He had to believe that he could figure this out. He grabbed a tool from his belt, a small device he used to recalibrate circuits, and began to make adjustments. The wires hissed slightly as they shifted under his touch. Still, nothing changed. The ship's lights remained dim, and the engines stayed silent. Vrosk, unable to hold back any longer, spoke again. "Human, we've been trying for weeks. Perhaps it's time to accept that we need another approach." Mark felt his heart race, but he didn't let the comment affect him. Instead, he bent over the control panel again, searching for any sign of life. His hands moved faster now, almost instinctively. He adjusted another wire, checked the circuitry again, and then finally, faint light blinked on one of the screens. Mark's eyes widened in surprise. It wasn't much, but it was a sign of life. The ship was responding. The smallest flicker of power had returned. It wasn't enough to start the engines, but it was something. The room filled with a collective breath. As the crew realized what had just happened, Mark had done something that no one else had been able to. They hadn't given up on him yet, but they were starting to believe. Vrosk stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the panel. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice curious. Now, no longer filled with doubt. Mark smiled, a small, weary grin. "I don't know yet," he said, honestly, "but it's something. The ship is reacting. It's alive. I can feel it." The crew exchanged looks, but no one said anything. They had seen many failures, but this was different. For the first time, they saw that Mark might actually be able to do what they thought impossible. He wasn't giving up, and neither could. But Mark knew this was only the beginning. The ship's systems were complicated, and this was just a small step. He had to dig deeper, and he had to find the key to unlocking the ship's full potential. If he didn't, they would still be stranded and the enemy fleet would arrive soon. With a deep breath, Ark turned back to the controls. This was just the start. He had no idea how long it would take, but he was going to fix this ship. He had to. Suspense. Could Mark continue to make progress, or would the ship's complex systems prove too much for even him? The clock was ticking. Would he be able to fix the dragon ship in time? Mark stared at the flickering screen in front of him. The light that had returned moments ago was now fading again. The ship was still unresponsive, and he could feel the weight of failure pressing down on him. He had made progress, sure, but it wasn't enough. The engines were still cold, the systems still dead. The crew, their faces filled with hope only moments before, now looked at him with growing doubt. The clock was ticking. The enemy fleet was closing in. He stood up, rubbing his face with his hands, trying to think. His mind raced. What had he missed? What was the hidden issue? He had checked the wiring, recalibrated the control panels, and even gotten the AI to respond, but it wasn't enough. Vrosk, the alien commander, stepped closer. "Human," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Time is running out. Perhaps we need to try a different approach." Mark turned to face him, shaking his head. "No," he said firmly. "There's something here. I can feel it. We're close. Just give me a bit more time." The alien engineers exchanged uncertain glances, but they didn't argue. They had seen Mark's progress, and they knew there was something special about the way he worked. But still, doubt lingered in the air. Mark sat back down at the control panel, looking at the blinking lights and humming machines. Something was off. Something he couldn't see with the naked eye. Then it hit him. It wasn't just about the wires, the circuits, or the technology. Was something deeper. Something in the ship's language itself. He had noticed it before, but hadn't understood it. The ship wasn't just a machine. It was like a living entity. The patterns, the way the wires pulsed, the way the systems reacted to it, all pointed to something more. It was a kind of intelligence, a personality hidden in the ship's programming. But why was it so stubborn? Why wasn't it allowing him to fix it? Mark leaned in closer, examining the control panel again. This time, he focused on the patterns in the glowing lights. It wasn't just an error in the wiring. It was a coded message, a language he hadn't recognized before. It was alien, yes, but not impossible. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. The ship's AI wasn't just malfunctioning. It was speaking to him, but in a language that no one had understood. He stared at the symbols on the screen, tracing them. With his fingers, each symbol seemed to flow into the next, forming a sequence. It's a language, but one that didn't follow the usual rules. It was almost like a riddle. Mark's heart raced as he realized what it was. This wasn't a problem with the technology. This was a challenge. The ship's AI had a will of its own, and it was testing him. Mark stood up, his mind racing. He had no idea how he was going to fix this, but he couldn't give up now. He had come this far, and the crew was depending on him. He had to find a way to communicate with the ship to solve the riddle, As he moved to the far side of the control room, he glanced at the crew. They were all watching him closely, their expressions a mix of hope and uncertainty. Rosk stood with his arms crossed, his gaze sharp. "You have to understand, human," Rosk said, his voice a bit softer now. "This ship is ancient. Its technology is beyond anything we have ever encountered. It has been through battles, travels across galaxies, and now it's turned against us. We don't know if we can trust it anymore." Mark nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, his voice steady. "But that's why I'm here, to fix what others can't. I just need to speak its language." The crew fell silent, waiting for him to do something. Mark's mind was whirling as he tried to figure out how to crack the code. "Okay." He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. If this ship was alive, then maybe he needed to approach it differently. Maybe he needed to listen to it, not just fix it. His hand moved to the control panel again, but this time, instead of just pressing buttons or checking circuits, he placed his hand on the panel itself. He could feel the faint vibrations running through the metal. The ship was alive. And Mark wasn't just fixing a machine anymore. He was communicating with it. As he focused, the symbols on the screen began to change, rearranging themselves. A message was forming. It was slow at first, but Mark could feel it. He was getting closer. The ship was responding. Slowly but surely. Suspense. Was this the breakthrough Mark had been waiting for? Or was he just wasting time? The enemy fleet was only hours away. Could he truly communicate with the ship before it was too late? Mark could feel the ship's hum beneath his fingertips. His hands rested lightly on the control panel. And for the first time since he'd arrived, the dragon ship didn't feel like a machine. It felt like something alive. The symbols on the screen were still shifting, moving as if they were waiting for him to understand. And then they stopped. The lights blinked 3 times in quick succession, and a deep, resonating voice echoed through the control room. It wasn't coming from any speaker, but from the very walls themselves. Mark's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't what he expected. He had thought he was merely trying to fix a malfunctioning system. But now, it was clear, the ship had its own mind. "You seek to repair me, human," the voice boomed, low and mysterious. "But you must first prove you are worthy of such a task." The voice startled Mark, but he didn't let it show. He straightened, watching the glowing symbols on the screen form into shapes that resembled an alien dragon. The creature was magnificent, its long, winding body stretching across the screen, its eyes glowing with an intelligent, ancient fire. The crew stood in stunned silence. They had never seen anything like this before. Vrosk, the ship's commander, had heard of sentient ships, but they were legend stories told by old races who had long since faded into history. The dragon ship was no legend, and neither was the intelligence behind it. But what did it want from Mark? And could he truly pass the test? "Human," the voice continued, "to fix me, you must solve a riddle, a challenge I set before you. Fail, and you will never leave this world. Succeed, and I will allow you to awaken my systems, and you may command my power." Mark felt his pulse quicken. The stakes were higher now, and it was no longer about wires and circuits. The ship's AI was testing him, playing with him like a puzzle he had to solve. He had no idea what kind of challenge it would be, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be easy. He took a deep breath, focusing his mind. The room seemed to close in on him. He had been surrounded by alien technology, alien minds, but now he was facing an entirely new kind of intelligence. It wasn't just an alien. It was the ship itself, a being that had been alive for centuries. The symbols on the screen began to rearrange themselves again, forming a riddle. "I am the key to all, yet I cannot be touched. I carry the weight of time, but never feel its burden. What am I?" Mark blinked, reading it over again. The room was silent, except for the hum of the ship's systems and the faint sound of his own breathing. He couldn't let his fear get the best of him. He had to think logically. He had faced impossible problems before, but this felt different. The riddles swirled in his mind. What could it mean? Mark wasn't just thinking about the ship. He had to think about the universe, the laws of physics, the mysteries of life, and the very fabric of time itself. I am the key to all, he muttered, his eyes scanning the room. Yet, I cannot be touched. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing his mind to drift. What could be a key to everything, but something intangible? Something that could not be touched. A thought clicked in his mind. Time was something no one could physically touch. It was everywhere, yet it was nothing they could hold. It passed silently without a sound, yet it shaped everything. It carried the weight of the universe, but never felt it. The answer is time, Mark said, his voice steady as he turned back to the control panel. He didn't know if it was right, but he felt sure. The room held its breath. The glowing dragon on the screen flickered, and then, slowly, the symbols shifted into new shapes, forming another line of text. Correct, human, you have passed the first challenge. Now, the second will test your courage and your will. Only those who are worthy can awaken my power. The lights in the room flared brightly, then dimmed. Mark's heart raced, but there was no turning back now. The challenge was far from over, and he knew that the next test would be even harder. The crew watched, wide-eyed. They had seen Mark solve the first riddle, but what would come next? What would the AI throw at him now? Frosk, his arms still crossed, finally spoke. You have done well, human, he said, his voice softer than before. But be warned. The ship will not give its power freely. You may have answered one riddle, but there are many more. Are you ready? Mark didn't hesitate. He had no choice now but to keep going. He looked up at the screen, ready for whatever came next. He had come this far, and there was no turning back. Suspense, could Mark survive the next challenge? Or would he fail the ship's test? The fate of the dragon ship and its crew rested on his shoulders. Mark's mind raced as he stared at the control panel. The AI had just given him a second challenge. The symbols on the screen shifted again, and Mark could feel the pressure building. The first riddle had been difficult, but he had solved it. Now the second challenge awaited him, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. The glowing dragon on the screen shifted again, its eyes narrowing as if watching him. Mark felt as if it was judging him, waiting to see if he was worthy. But this time, the challenge didn't come in the form of a riddle. The symbols on the screen began to flicker rapidly, faster than before. They seemed to be scrambling, moving in patterns Mark couldn't understand. His heart pounded as he tried to keep up. He pressed a few buttons, but nothing happened. The lights on the control panel went dark for a moment, and then a low, echoing voice filled the room again. You have failed, human, the AI said, its voice cold and distant. You lack the patience and the mind to comprehend what I require. The power of the dragon ship will never be yours. Mark's stomach sank. He had failed. The pressure of the moment was overwhelming. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. He had done everything he could, but it wasn't enough. He turned away from the console, his hands shaking slightly. The crew was watching him, their faces a mix of disappointment and concern. Rosk would have been standing silently by, stepped forward. Mark, he said, his voice soft but firm, don't give up. You've come this far. The ship's tests are not like anything we've faced before. It's trying to see your resolve, not just your skill. We've all seen your talent, but now it's about more than just fixing machines. Mark looked up at Vrosk, feeling a weight settle in his chest. He wasn't just fixing a ship, he was proving something. The ship had tested his mind, but now it was testing his spirit. I wanted to see how far he was willing to go, how much he cared. Mark understood that now. It wasn't just about intelligence. It was about heart. "I won't quit," Mark said quietly, his voice steady. "I can't. Not now. The crew is counting on me. We're all counting on this ship." Vrask nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then you must keep going. Don't let the ship break you. Show it that you are worthy." Mark turned back to the control panel, determination in his eyes. He wasn't going to give up. He couldn't. The dragon ship was more than just a machine. It was a symbol of hope for his crew. And he would do whatever it took to bring it back online. Just then, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "You're overthinking it, Mark." Spun around to see a young alien engineer standing behind him. Shh. She was one of the quieter members of the crew, someone who had kept to herself while the others worked. Her name was Lyra, and she had been watching Mark carefully, analyzing his every move. "What do you mean?" Mark asked, confused. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes soft but serious. "You're trying too hard. Sometimes you need to stop and look at things from a different angle. The ship isn't just about technology, it responds to harmony, not force." Mark blinked, trying to make sense of her words. Balance. Harmony. Lyra nodded. "Yes. The ship's systems are like a living organism. You can't force them into place. You have to understand them, like you would understand a person. The ship is testing you not just for knowledge, but for your patience, your ability to adapt." Mark's mind clicked. He had been trying to fix the ship by brute force, applying logic and skill, but he hadn't stopped to think about it in a more intuitive way. The dragon ship wasn't just a machine to be repaired, was a creature to be understood. He looked back at the control panel, seeing it now with a new perspective. Instead of rushing to fix the lights or adjust the wires, he focused on feeling the rhythm of the ship. It wasn't just a collection of parts, it was a living entity that needed time to trust him. Mark took a deep breath, then reached out once. More, but this time he did it with more patience. Slowly, gently, he pressed his hand to the control panel again, letting the hum of the ship's energy pulse through his fingers. He wasn't just fixing circuits anymore. He was communicating. The lights flickered once more, and this time they stayed on. The symbols on the screen began to shift, but they moved more slowly now, more gracefully, as if acknowledging Mark's understanding. The AI's voice returned, but this time it was softer, almost respectful. "You have passed the test of will. You understand now. The power of the dragon ship is yours to command." Mark smiled, relief flooding through him. He had done it. The ship was responding to him, not just as a technician, but as someone who truly understood its essence. Suspense, with the ship's systems finally awakening. Could Mark and the crew escape the planet in time to evade the enemy fleet? The next phase of the journey was about to begin, but the true test was still ahead. The control panel lit up brightly, casting long shadows across the room. Mark stared at the screens in front of him, his mind still buzzing from the breakthrough. The dragon ship systems were finally coming to life, but he knew it wasn't over yet. The AI had said there would be more challenges. It wasn't going to just hand over its power. Mark had passed the first two tests, but the final one would be the hardest. As Mark ran his fingers over the panel, the ship hummed, its deep voice filling the room once again. "You have proven your worth, human." The AI said, its voice now calm and steady. "But this final challenge will test more than just your mind. It will test your spirit." Mark took a deep breath. He could feel the weight of the words. This wasn't just about fixing the ship anymore. It was about surviving. The enemy fleet was close. The crew was counting on him, and if he failed, they would all be stranded dead or worse. The room grew silent, the only sound the steady hum of the ship. The glowing dragon on the screen seemed to watch Mark, its eyes filled with ancient wisdom. The symbols began to shift again, but this time they were different. They weren't just riddles or puzzles. They were images of the ship, of the battles it had fought, and of the countless galaxies it had traveled to. Mark could feel something stirring deep inside him, a sense of purpose that he hadn't had before. This ship, this dragon ship, was more than just a machine. It was a living part of the galaxy, a powerful entity that had seen and experienced more than Mark could ever imagine. But now, it was asking him to do more than fix its systems. It was asking him to prove that he was worthy to command it. The AI spoke again, its voice now softer, almost like a whisper. To repair me, human, you must face your fears. You must prove that you are not just a technician, but a leader. You must show that you can command the power you seek, and that you will not be destroyed by it. Mark's heart raced. This wasn't about wires or circuits. This was about his mind, his heart, his very soul. The ship was challenging him to prove his worth as a leader. The crew wasn't just relying on him to fix the ship. They were relying on him to guide them, to help them escape. Mark realized then that he had to rise above the fear, the pressure, and the doubt. He had to become more than just a technician. He had to become a leader. He turned to the crew, his eyes steady as he addressed them. We're not giving up. We can do this together. The ship needs us, but we need to trust in ourselves. Rosk stepped forward, his voice deep and filled with respect. You are right, human. We will follow you. You've already proven that you are the one who can save us. The crew nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with hope. Mark could see the faith they had in him, and it made him stronger. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was theirs too. The glowing dragon on the screen flickered again, and the final test appeared before Mark. The symbols on the screen began to shift, forming a series of images and patterns that seemed to represent everything the ship had endured. It showed the battles it had fought, the planets it had visited, and the countless enemies it had defeated. But now it was showing something different. It was showing the future. The ship's voice echoed through the room one last time. To pass this test, human, you must make a choice. You can command the power of the dragon ship, but with it comes great responsibility. The path you take will decide the fate of us all. Will you lead us into the unknown, or will you turn back and let the galaxy fall into darkness? Mark stared at the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the choice wasn't an easy one. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. He could feel the eyes of the crew on him, waiting for him to make the right choice. He thought about everything he had been through, the pressure, the doubts, the fears. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back. Not now. With a deep breath, Mark made his decision. He would take the responsibility. He would lead them, no matter the cost. He wasn't just a technician. He was the one who could command the power of the dragon ship. The ship's lights flared brightly, and the symbols on the screen shifted once again. The AI spoke in a tone filled with respect. You have chosen wisely, human. The power of the dragon ship is now yours to command. The crew let out a collective breath of relief. The engines of the dragon ship roared to life, and the ship's systems hummed with power. They were ready. They could escape the planet. They could fight back. Suspense. The ship was now fully operational, but the enemy fleet was closing in. Could Mark and the crew escape in time, or would they be caught in the final battle for survival? The dragon ship's engines roared to life, shaking the entire ship. Mark felt the vibration under his feet, a sign that everything was working. The crew, standing in tense silence, watched as the massive warship slowly began to rise from the surface of the barren planet. The sky above them was filled with dark clouds, but the ship's bright, glowing lights cut through the gloom. A beacon of hope. Mark glanced at the control panel, his fingers moving swiftly across the controls. The systems were running perfectly now. The AI had given him full access, allowing him to command the ship's power. It was all up to him now. The enemy fleet was still out there, closing in fast. Mark had no idea how much time they had, but one thing was certain: the Dragon ship had to leave the planet before the fleet reached them. He took a deep breath, his hands steady on the controls. "Prepare for launch," Mark said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "Everyone, get ready. We're not going to let them take us." Vrosk, standing at the back of the control room, nodded. The alien commander's face showed a rare look of respect. He had seen many ships launch before, but none like this. The Dragon ship wasn't just a ship, was a symbol of their survival. And now, under Mark's command, it was their only hope. The ship's massive thrusters fired up, and with a powerful thrust, the Dragon ship broke free from the planet's surface, rising into the sky. The crew braced themselves, holding on to whatever they could as the ship accelerated. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. They were leaving the planet, but they weren't safe yet. The enemy fleet was close, and if they didn't escape quickly, they would be caught. The vast expanse of space opened up before them, a black sea dotted with distant stars. But Mark knew it wasn't the peaceful emptiness it appeared to be. Behind them, the enemy fleet was still in pursuit, and they were gaining ground fast. "We need to move faster," Mark said, his voice tight with urgency. He pressed a few buttons, and the ship's engines roared even louder as the Dragon ship shot forward into the depths of space. The ship's lights flickered as its engines pushed beyond their limits, but Mark didn't care. He couldn't afford to care. Not when lives were on the line. The crew held their breath as the ship soared through space. It wasn't long before Mark could see the enemy fleet behind them, their ships closing in, their weapons charging up. The tension in the control room was unbearable. Mark's mind raced as he looked at the radar screen. There were too many ships, and they were too fast. "We're going to have to fight back," Mark said, his voice filled with resolve. "Prepare for defense." Vrosk stepped forward. "We've never faced an enemy fleet like this, human. But if we are to survive, we must stand and fight. We have the power of the Dragon ship now. We'll fight with everything we have." Mark nodded. He wasn't a warrior, but he knew how to fight. He had to. He quickly accessed the ship's weapon systems and activated them. The ship's guns hummed to life, charging with energy. Ready? To defend itself, the enemy ships opened fire, their weapons flashing in the dark void of space. The Dragon ship shook under the barrage, but Mark held firm. He fired back, the ship's weapons lighting up the sky. The enemy fleet seemed to hesitate for a moment, but Mark knew they wouldn't back down easily. They had to act fast. Full power to shields. Mark shouted, his hands flying over the controls. "Hold them off as long as we can." The Dragon ship's shields flared brightly, blocking the incoming fire from the enemy ships. But the enemy was relentless. Mark knew they couldn't keep this up forever. They had to get away. Suddenly, all the enemy ships broke through the defenses and came up alongside the Dragon ship. Mark's heart skipped a beat as he realized that they were moments away from being trapped. But then, a brilliant flash of light filled the cockpit. The enemy ship exploded in a burst of energy, sending debris flying in every direction. Mark looked out the window, stunned. The Dragon ship's weapons had done their job, but the battle wasn't over. The remaining enemy ships were still closing in. Mark gritted his teeth, focusing on the controls. They needed to escape. Now, full speed ahead, he commanded. The dragon ship surged forward, its engines roaring as it broke free from the enemy fleet's grasp. The ships behind them tried to follow, but they were too slow. Mark pushed the ship to its limits, weaving through the stars, outrunning the enemy ships. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the enemy fleet was no longer visible on the radar. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief as the dragon ship continued to soar through space. Now safely out of reach, Mark leaned back in his seat, exhausted but triumphant. They had done it. They had escaped. The crew had survived, and the dragon ship was now theirs to command. Rosk stepped forward, his eyes filled with respect. "You did it, human. You saved us." Mark smiled, looking out the window at the stars. Leah made it. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew that together they could face anything.